Welcome to the Market Mystics podcast, where we discuss what's happening in the cryptosphere and trading on earth as it is in heaven. Buckle up and huddle on while we dive in and get weird. Here are your hosts, Joshua and Kim.
Good afternoon, evening, morning, whenever it is that you happen to catch up with us. It's currently afternoon for us, though.
Tis. So let's dive in today. Start with some market updates. We've had a decent week, I think.
Yeah, this 7 days looking real strong.
It's true. However, in the last day, we have seen most of the top 50, I would say. Most of the top 50 have gone down a bit, but not significant dips or dives like we've seen in the last week and a half.
I'd say 3 to 5% is pretty consistent across the top 50.
Mm-hmm. Which in the cryptosphere is not so worrisome, I would say.
Yeah, not that big of a deal. I was looking when I was putting those numbers together, I was looking for something that was not participating in the pullback. And the one that stood out first was Cosmos, and it's actually up 5%. And so I thought that was really interesting. I've followed Cosmos for a little while, have invested in and out of it, but it's just pretty interesting to look at them over maybe the past couple months. They've been pretty strong. They're making some moves.
Nice. Yeah, there are a few that aren't following the trends. I saw another, which is Near. And it was up a little bit on the 24-hour as well. But in general, everything's down, except as Josh put in our notes, which I found to be funny, and maybe this just shows how geeky I really am. But he did put on there that USDT Tether is at 0% for the last 24 hours.
Yeah, I know that's shocking to all of our listeners, but
those stable coins just holding steady at $1. Man, didn't see that one coming.
Yeah. So what's on the agenda for today, Kim? What are we talking about?
So today we want to take a quick dive into what is money exactly. Sounds like it could be a really obvious answer, but I think with everything that's going on in the world, so not just the attacks in different countries and stuff, but we can take a look at different currencies of the world versus crypto and see what's moving, what's happening, and is what we have traditionally thought of as money starting to shift.
Right, exactly. What kind of spurred this conversation was a tweet that I saw from Michael Saylor, who, if you follow crypto at all, you'll recognize as a name that is very prevalent in the crypto space. But he proposed the question, what is money? And then goes on, it's a question that economists have pondered for centuries, but the blocking of Russia's central bank reserves has revived its relevance for the world's biggest nations. And then he, at the bottom, goes, Bitcoin is money, everything else is credit. And this just kind of caused us to dig into this a little bit and be like, okay, well, what is our understanding of money? How do we see it being used? And what's he trying to imply or shed light on with this tweet? So one of the definitions I found of money was it's something that's generally accepted as a medium of exchange. It's a measure of value or a means of payment. And, that, I guess that makes sense, in my mind of how we use money. But really what the tweet, I think the essence of the tweet is getting at is if I have a dollar bill, it is not actually worth anything. It has no value. It's a promissory note that says, I'm going to give this to you, and the person who I got it from will give you money.
It is an
Um,
IOU.
yeah. And that's it's just a really interesting thing to step back and take a look at. So they were discussing the he pointed out the Russian reserves and how with the sanctions that have been put on Russia, it's limited their ability to access money that they had kept in other currencies. And the reasons countries do that is to protect their assets should something happen in their economy. It's unlikely that something would happen to the global economy. So if you have some of the euro and you have some of the dollar and you have some of the pound and some of the ruble or whatever, if one of them goes down, it's not likely that all of them will go down at the same time. So it's a
Mm.
bit of a safe haven. But what they were pointing out was just like in the flick of a switch, everyone locked their access to Russia's ability to access that money, essentially making it worthless, just instantly making it worthless.
Hmm.
And it's just such an interesting thing to look at of how something that we perceive to have great value in the matter of a moment cannot have value. So it really got me thinking, like, okay, where am I putting my value? Where am I putting my focus? What truly has value? And just kind of looking at this, and it sometimes it takes these big world events for you to just even notice that maybe something doesn't work quite the way you thought it worked.
Yeah, I think this is true, and it's an interesting conversation. Just given all of these events have come at the, I guess now we can call it the tail end of the pandemic, because now nobody talks about the pandemic anymore. Apparently it's gone. I don't know. Um, but during the pandemic, at least in the US, and I assume this happened in other economies as well. Forgive me because I'm not as educated on all of the other global economies. But the US started printing more money
Mm,
without having a liquid backing behind it, I suppose. And so we've talked about this in some other episodes. I don't recall the exact amounts, but with that, some of these global stores or reserves of even just the US dollar have become worth less and less. I'm not
mm,
saying it's worthless. I'm just saying it has become worth far significantly less in the last couple of years. And it's, if you look at some of the charts for currencies and where they have been going, I think it's quite telling of how much, and I really can only speak for the US, we've kind of been printing money with no regard to what its value actually should be.
right.
Um, and I would hope that the people at the Federal Reserve and the people in the government who are okaying these moves would be thinking in a broader scope of things. But when we start looking at value, we start seeing the US dollar going down in value because there has been so much more printed. But that being said, Russia may have a reserve of the US dollar, but doesn't matter. Um, at this point, it doesn't matter. And so, how does that reflect on the value of the dollar in the globe? This is what I want
Mm,
to ask about it. And is it the form of money that the globe is going to continue to rely upon? That's what I want to know too.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Just to really ponder and say, okay, where are we? What's going on? And where are we going?
Yeah. We see, we talked about this in our last episode. There are a lot of donations happening and being poured into Ukraine at the moment. Josh, you said just a few minutes ago that the count is up to almost 54 million.
I think
Is
it
that
was,
right?
yeah, 50
In
something million.
cryptocurrency. So that upon last count, that was in Bitcoin, Ethereum. Um, I believe it. I believe it was Tether, which is USDT, and Polkadot. Those are the last ones I knew of that they were accepting. But that's quite the donation reserve. And so I guess I don't have the count, and this hasn't been reported so widely. I don't have the count of the US dollars that are pouring in.
Hmm.
But when you see a government that is now asking for and accepting donations in this form of cryptocurrency, which has previously kind of been poo-pooed, probably poo-pooed by a lot of governments as a viable currency.
Hmm.
And now the government is saying, yes, here's our address, please send it to us.
Right. Yeah.
I think that is very telling in the climate of mass adoption of cryptocurrency in the world. Even though it's taken this crisis to have that happen, there's been a big spotlight shined on this, shown in that direction.
It's been illuminated. Yeah, I think that's really, it's so interesting to look at. In one of our recent episodes, we talked about how Russia had been blocked from using the SWIFT system. And I don't think that that same thing applied to Ukraine, but I'm wondering if just everything that was going on makes it harder to use that international monetary way of transferring funds back and forth. And that's maybe why you see crypto, is because it doesn't utilize the same technology. It's a different type of a transfer. It flows through different channels. And maybe that's why we're seeing crypto being more widely accepted, because it doesn't go through the normal channels that the other fiat type currencies use. And maybe it makes it more accessible. Maybe it makes it faster. I don't know the exact reasons for why Ukraine is pushing for crypto donations, but you're right. It's definitely thrusting crypto and Bitcoin into the spotlight of, hey, this is a viable way to transact, and to transact internationally.
Yes. And one other thing I want to point out on this same note is, so we talked about a little bit about the devaluing of some of these fiat currencies, but I was looking into just a few, just to kind of get an idea of what is happening with global currency. And so we talked about it in episodes. The whole world's been talking about it. The US dollar is down at least 7.5% in value since January, since the beginning of 2022. So that's in a matter of just a little over 2 months, it's down 7.5% in value. Now, since I would say these are figures from the last month, but because of what's happened with Russia and Ukraine, the Russian ruble is down 45% in the last 30 days. There are others that are still fine. The euro hasn't seen a whole lot of change. We were looking at the South African rand, and at least compared to the dollar, which again is down. So, I mean, what are you measuring against? But the rand is almost even with where it was 1 year ago today. One that I saw that I've heard others talking about before, but the Turkish lira is down 88% in the last year.
That's so wild.
And so you wonder why you start seeing some of these governments and just people who are in countries flocking to things like cryptocurrency. And even though the markets have been fairly volatile, I'm going to look at Bitcoin in the last year. Well, that's probably a bad example. It's down 17% in the last year. However, in the last 5 years, it is, I can't even do the math. It's up from about $1,200 to $41,000.
Yeah.
Um,
Many multiples.
right. So when we're looking at over time, why people are starting to turn to cryptocurrency, it's because it's something that is continually increasing in value as we start to see a lot of the world's currencies decreasing in value.
Yeah.
And this is why, especially in these times of crisis, people are turning to it because it's something that is a bit more stable than their own country's fiat.
Yeah. One of the things I was thinking about was some of this devaluation, I think, has to be directly tied to when we stopped backing our money with gold or silver
Yeah.
or whatever precious metal it may be. But we sort of just started backing it on almost the intellectual property of a nation, like the intangible value of a nation.
Kind of.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I was looking, and you know, historically, central banks have issued money and then tried to purchase gold or silver things to have that as a store
Mhm.
against the money that they've put out. But I saw a figure that said that currently most central banks only have 13% of their value in gold, and the majority of the rest of it is in foreign currencies. And so they're really betting on, I mean, most people know that our central bank is a privately owned company that issues our money, but most other central banks around the world are also the same thing. And so they're basically saying, we believe that these other private entities that sort of are connected to these countries will remain to have value. And so instead of purchasing something that arguably has lasting value, they're purchasing just other currencies to back the money that they're issuing. And I think that gets to be a pretty unstable bridge when our economy is built on the success of somebody else's economy and their economy is built on the success of somebody else's economy. It's like a deck of cards, and like it seems like it wouldn't take much to sort of crumple that, which is sort of what we talked about with Russia, and all of a sudden this 630 billion in foreign exchange money that they had is just mostly unavailable.
Right. Uh, we had an article that we were looking at before this that kind of made some comparisons that made it a little easier to understand. I thought it was easier to understand this concept exactly that you're talking about. It says many economists have long equated this money to savings in a piggy bank, which in turn, this money being money like currency or the money that's held in reserve, which in turn correspond to investments made abroad in the real economy. Recent events highlight the error in this thinking. Barring gold, these assets are someone else's liability, someone who can just decide they're worth nothing, which is exactly what we're seeing with Russia. So they have these stores of other fiat or other currencies, and now all of a sudden the issuers say, oh, but it's not worth anything for you. You can't use that anymore. And so now it has made their value, or I guess their stored value, so much lower than what it was a week and a half ago, even.
Right.
And taking this back to crypto, there's a lot of criticism out there for allowing Russia to still use blockchain technology, including Bitcoin, Ethereum, any stable coins, anything like that, because of all the sanctions that have been placed against them. However, the thing about cryptocurrency is that the blockchain is not owned by any specific government. And so, though you can lock down and put sanctions on the exchanges that are allowing transactions to go through, or facilitating those transactions, I would say, you can do that. And so all of the American exchanges cannot allow for Russian citizens or Russian government to participate in their services. But that the service is not the blockchain. The service is the accommodation of the exchange. So that doesn't mean that they are now exempt from Bitcoin. It means that they're exempt from using an American company or American people to move the money. Right. And I think this is where people are getting real mixed up. It is helping on both sides of this conflict. And I would even argue that it is helping those who are in the wrong, but it's also helping those who are completely innocent and have nothing to do with anything except being in those nations.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, no, I would totally agree with that.
Yeah.
So one of the other things I wanted to point out was, we've talked before about Bitcoin and gold and sort of the relationship between the two and the comparisons between the two. But one of the things that I wanted to point out, like, just because I think it's important to realize, I love gold. I think it's amazing, but it's hard to transact with on a day-to-day basis. I saw an example that was like, are you going to take a gold bar to a restaurant and slice off a sliver of it when it's time to pay? Like, that's a very challenging thing to do. And most people don't accept that as a form of payment.
Right.
It's true. But Bitcoin, because of its ease of use, is so simple. I mean, you could see this at a restaurant where on your receipt they just have a QR code, and all you do is scan the QR code with your phone and transfer the money for your bill, and away you go. And like, that to me is like, it's such a simple thing to do. And with Bitcoin being able to be divisible to the eighth decimal, it makes transacting in it so simple down to this, down to the penny.
Down to the Satoshi.
Right. Yes. And really what what needs to happen, I think, or what will happen as these countries start accepting it as legal tender, as businesses start accepting it, I think you will see ways of transacting that change so that it becomes easier and more affordable to actually transact small amounts. That's one of the things we've talked a lot about with NFTs and just crypto in general is, the fees can be pretty high, especially if you're dealing in small amounts. It may cost you just as much to transfer as what you are trying to spend. But I think we'll see. I know some exchanges already do this, but they have like no transfer fees between friends and family, but I think you'll see more of that coming as people start using it more, as it becomes more and more accepted as a type of currency.
Absolutely. I think the word that keeps coming to me is viability.
Mm,
How realistic is this to be a real and efficient way of making transactions, of making exchanges, not a platform, but when we talked about the very definition of money, it's something that's generally accepted as a medium of exchange, right? I will give you this in exchange for that. I will give
mm.
you this nickel in exchange for that piece of gum, which it would probably right now with inflation be about $1. Right. But there's an exchange. And sometimes it's from money to money, like from currency to currency. We've done this. We've traveled overseas and we've gone to an exchange and we've given them our dollar in exchange for their rand so that we can then go transact in other places. Um, but I don't know. I somehow have lost my train of thought. I just think the viability of this is coming more and more to the forefront. I think it's always been there.
Mm,
But as people are realizing the everyday use and ease of use and the efficiency in which this can be used and how it can hold value, like maintain, not just grasp onto value, but how it can maintain a value when other things are getting shaky
mm.
around the world. I think this is what's going to open up some doors for truly the mass adoption that we've been looking for.
Yeah, no, I totally
Yeah.
agree. I liked your explanation of like traveling internationally, exchanging money, because I often have compared credit cards to being like an early type of crypto. And so I think about like when we would go to restaurants or to stores, I can use my Visa card and they automatically transfer the value from the dollar that I'm spending to the rand that we were spending there.
Right.
But crypto kind of does the same thing, except for there's no exchange because both people are viewing that that item as having the value.
Right.
And I think that that's just another step, another evolution in this whole process is as it's just more accepted around, you don't have the exchanges, you don't have the need for a middleman to say, okay, I will help transfer your whatever currency to whatever currency. Now you're just both saying, I give value to this item and just moving straight peer to peer. And
Right.
I think it's beautiful to see. I'm encouraged to see more people transacting that way, more people recognizing it as a way to transact. And I think there's a lot of hope, there's a lot of benefit in this being a real thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I have one more thing I want to just drop out there. And this is, I don't know if you'd call it a prediction. I said earlier this year that I think my prediction for the year was that ETH would lose its number 2 spot. And I think the more that people are adopting cryptocurrency as currency, we're going to start seeing some of the coins that can be viably used as currencies move their way up in the ranks. So Ethereum, which I support, I support their platform. I like what they do with smart contracts, all of these things, except their fees are so high. When we're looking at this as a mass adoption thing to be able to exchange as money, I don't think Ethereum fits that bill just because it's so expensive to transact. I think we're going to start seeing others emerge that have much lower fees and quicker processing times so that we can use it as effectively as I think we a people have come to want to exchange digital assets.
Right.
When I swipe my Visa card, like it's like that. I can then go to my bank account and see that transaction is pending or is already processing there. And I think that's what we're going to start seeing more of, at least when the currencies are emerging.
I agree with that. And to me, one of the biggest differentiations between Bitcoin and Ethereum is Bitcoin is capped at a limit of total coins, whereas Ethereum is unlimited in what they can produce. And as people are running to alternative types of currency because of rampant inflation, they're going to look for something that's different. They're going to look for something that is anti-inflationary.
Yeah.
And so the coins that have a capped limit are going to stand out as the more beneficial coins to be used in that way. Not that the other coins don't have a purpose, that their blockchains don't have a purpose, but I don't think that it serves a purpose as a financial instrument.
I could not agree more. It makes me think of gold, like limited resources. This is part of what gives things value, at least in the history of our exchanging of money, right? Oh, look at that. See, I'm sitting here holding a silver coin. I've just been fiddling with this whole time. But I think that's important, this limited resource, another thing that is a limited resource that we never talk about so much as kind of a currency or something that we exchange. But one of the things I've realized in the last few months is that time is one of my most precious commodities, because it's not necessarily never ending. I only have 24 hours in this day in which to spend on whatever I have deemed has value enough to spend my time on. And, there are perspective shifts that happen with that. But I think the same thing when we're looking at what is really money now. What are we really holding as valuable and willing to spend in exchange for something else that we put value on? Same kind of concept.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's about all we have for today. So thanks, guys, for joining us. If you have any questions, comments, reach out on our socials. We'd love to interact with you guys more. And we've talked about doing a question and answer episode. So if you guys want to start sending in some questions, maybe we can gather those together and address it in one swipe.
That would be fun. Yeah. Okay. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
See ya.
Thank you for listening. Join us every Monday and Thursday as we discuss trading on earth as it is in heaven. If you want to connect further, follow us on social media at market.mystics for Instagram and TikTok, and search for Market Mystics on YouTube and Facebook. If you still need more, follow the link on Facebook to book a coaching appointment. Until next time, see ya.